Do what?
We've got one commissioner going out to get another commissioner, so. And here we are. Okay, I want to reconvene the meeting. And I'm going to start with the reintroduction of commissioners.
Robert Wilson, Pittsburgh.
Roger Marshall, Great Bend.
And I'm Gerald Lauber from Topeka.
Tom Dale, Salina.
Don Budd, Kansas City.
Support.
And Keith Saxon, Pratt.
Robin Jennison, Topeka.
Chris Tymason, Legal Counsel.
Todd Workman, Topeka.
Linda Craighead, Topeka.
Okay, this is the time we have some general public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have some people who want to address the group? Tim?
Tim Donges with the Quality Deer Management Association. I recently took a look at the overall quality here in Kansas with a number of trophy class deer being harvested. Also compared it to a lot of the other Midwest states that I consider competitors for where hunters actually go to hunt, whether non-resident or residents of Kansas go elsewhere. The reason why I kind of looked into this a little bit, I got a research report from the Boone and Crockett Club, and what they found is there's been a 2% decline in overall scores of the trophy class big game animals being taken. Not necessarily the number of trophies, but the actual scores themselves are seeing a drop. And they're associating this with the overall loss of age structure amongst big game animals across the world. And it has to do with possibility of over-harvesting. And one of the things I looked at is where have all these states come from in the last 25 years? And I took it down to 5-year increments through their database. And what I found was one thing was here in Kansas, from 06 to 2010, we've actually lost 2 positions. We've dropped from number 6 to number 8. And one of the things that's interesting when I went through a lot of these different states and compared to what's going on here in Kansas is one thing that's common is a lot of the states also that do better in Kansas have a shotgun season for a regular firearm season. And one of the reasons I think a lot of this was introduced years ago had to do with safety, because it's a lot of Midwest states where it's more open territory. I think it had to do with public safety to keep from rifle projectile traveling a long distance. But the real kicker is with it is, which I don't believe they had intentions of this occurring, is it actually allows more of the survivability of some of our bucks into the older age class. And so they've actually helps them stay above Kansas here. To me, it also affects our overall revenue. And one of the things I broke this down into several different categories, and one of the things that shows up is these states also have 4 times the number of hunters as we do, deer hunters. And they're also harvesting 4 times the number of bucks as we do. But they're still producing more trophy class than we are. And so it tells me, I mean, through logical consideration, that they must be more deer getting to older age classes. And so I thought, well, maybe this is something Kansas would be willing to look at, maybe not. I grew up in a traditional rifle hunting state. I hunted a shotgun state for about 10 years, enjoyed it, had a great success with it. My thought was maybe it would improve the overall quality of the deer herd here. It would increase our buck population, but also would increase our overall age structure, which is what's biologically sound. And the other option to this, in which I've talked to other biologists across the United States that are involved in deer management, and one of the other things they implement is antler restrictions. and not really in favor of a point restriction type program because I don't know that that would do us any good here in Kansas. But one of the things that a lot of the states are doing, which a lot of the whitetail deer biologists believe is a better system, is they actually use an inside spread of, say, like a 15-inch inside spread. Along with that comes an 18-inch main beam length. So if you have a mature buck that maybe is only 14 inches, he's going to express his overall main beam length so you can still harvest him at that point. And what this would do is, if we had more bucks surviving to the older age class, one, it's biologically sound. The other thing is we're going to increase opportunities for those that actually come here and hunt our whitetail deer for trophy class purposes, which would ensure, selling more licenses, which is with revenue is important actually to our program, but also would encourage more people to harvest does. And that's always the concern with our legislatures is how can we increase the harvest of our antlerless deer? And I get guys out there say, well, I'm just a meat hunter. I don't care about antlers. I just take the first buck I see. Well, if you're really a true meat hunter, you harvest does. That's what you do. And so what I look at is how can we make things better here for Kansas and for the hunters here? Because that's one of the big things I hear meeting after meeting is the hunters, whether it's crossbows or whatever that situation might be, is the big concern, really, I believe, the underlying concern is the fear that we're going to lose the quality of our deer herd. And so I wanted to bring this forward to you. I've done a little research on it, and what concerned me is it's not huge differences in numbers, as in trophies, compared to some states above us. But if we're going to stay in the game, we really need to be thinking towards the future of our deer herd. We've done a good job as an organization in our eastern states, which the quality deer management there is doing a lot better. Those guys say, they tell me all the time, say, Kansas, you guys aren't going to be the state to come to anymore. We're going to be staying home. We're not going to be coming here in the future because we're doing such a good job with our deer herd. And the thing is the state has stepped in, and they have done some mandates in some of these other states, but also, of course, education has come a long ways with our organization and other groups to try to get people to let the young bucks grow up and harvest more mature deer. And the thing is as we have an even age structure of bucks to doe population, it also shortens your overall rut length, which is happy for the people driving down the road, so we don't have deer running back and forth across the roads for 50 or 60 days in areas where the population is skewed. When a population is in check and it is in balance, which it naturally occurs 1-to-1 through Mother Nature, then it shortens the rut, which is an intense rut. It's a lot stronger, but it's a lot shorter, and it also gets our fawns to be born at the proper time of the year when there's good spring green up, early summer. We got good protein in the milk for the lactation period. We got a good fawn being started off the ground versus having a skewed deer herd where maybe the rut runs in a position where it's 90 days in length. We then have a fawn that's being born when the nutrition's not so great. So this all comes down to it's a system, it's a balance to it. And I'm just always looking for ways is how can we be doing things better? And one of the things I'm looking at is, hey, what can we do as a state agency? We're trying to do what we can here in Kansas to educate the public, but what can we do as a state agency to try to make things better? And it would make things better for everybody. Is at least I think it would, for the most part, the majority of people. And one of the things that the states that have been doing deer management longer than us, one of the big problems they always had is they had a population problem that they couldn't get under control. And that was one of the biggest challenges. And I think here in Kansas, overall, I think you guys are doing a pretty good job. I think our season runs 4 or 5 months long. You're creating a lot of opportunities for doe harvest. But the concern is are we going to be able to keep up with these other states in the future with our overall quality of the deer herd? And that is, are we going to have that age structure available? The 3.5, and on up deer is what I'm looking at, the bucks. And really, we look at a buck being mature at 5.5 years of age. That's when he reaches maturity. At a doe, we really look at more of a 2.5 year of age due to the fact that's when she's more likely to reach reproductive maturity. And so we want to encourage more people to harvest does, but also encourage people to let some young bucks walk. That's what's biologically sound, but it's also good for hunting. And so that's why I wanted to kind of bring this forward to you, kind of take a look at it as a group, your deer committee, and see, is there anything that we can be doing to try to make things better here for the future for the hunters. And that's basically what I have. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to kind of take that, as it comes. But I live here as a hunter. We're trying to do what we can here. But we believe state agencies, they also have a role in this, and so we want to ensure the future of our whitetail deer hunting here in the state. So that's all I have. So anybody have any questions? on anything.
Any questions? Michael?
Okay, give me 3 sentences what you're wanting.
Okay. 3 sentences. Basically, either a antler restriction program or look at a possible, during our regular deer firearm season, going to a possible shotgun season. We would still allow a rifle season during the antlerless season if you would like to, in order to achieve those harvest goals of the does, which is important for population control. That's where our population control is there. So, basically, got it? All right, thank you.
Any other public comment? Well, then let's get on with the meeting here. Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Tonight, the first item on the agenda is KAR 115-2-1. This is a permanent regulation related to fish and wildlife licenses and permit fees. And we have a proposed amendment would allow the establishment of fees for a combination non-resident antlered and antlerless permit. And this was directed to us by the legislature last year, one of the Senate bills that was passed last year, for the department to develop a combination permit. The item that we have is on page 3 of that regulation, and it creates a non-resident combination 2-deer permit that would be $315. And I'm open to any questions or comments that you have. This is something we've workshopped as far as why we went with this particular group and also the fee associated with it.
Does the commission have any questions? Any questions from the public? Mike?
Lloyd, this is for any non-resident permit, firearm, muzzleloader, archery?
This would be, yes, that's correct so far.
And if they buy the mule deer stamp, they'll get any deer or any buck, whatever it would be, plus a whitetail antlerless only.
Right. These are the people that are applying for permits. This is not the hunt-owned land type of permits, but it would be those 3 classes of permits, the muzzleloader, the firearm, and the archery, which is a whitetail either sex permit, had been $300, and it also will include a whitetail antlerless permit, which had been $50. And still is.
Basically, they're getting about a $35 price break, is that right?
But it is all members of that group would have that 2-tag system. The reason, Mike, I'll mention it, the reason that we went with that group is due to the concerns that antlerless harvest was not adequate on areas where non-residents were leasing land. And part of that was that they were not buying antlerless permits at the same rate that residents were. This basically makes the first whitetail antlerless permit, it makes it mandatory for them they would obtain it, and it's also at the same dollar value that the residents would pay for it.
Okay, now, can a person, Lloyd, just buy a regular antlered deer permit and not buy the combination?
No.
So even though it's listed as a hunting permit, it's no longer available and the combination is available?
The combination will be available.
All right.
The other permit will still be on the books, as will the whitetail antlerless if they want to buy a second or second to 5th additional whitetail antlerless permit.
What's the law now? And can they buy only an antlerless only permit now for an antlerless season, like the January season?
Yes, they can.
And they will not be able to do that?
Sure, they could. They will be able to do that. That's for people who, after December 30th, individuals who do not have an either sex permit can buy just the whitetail antlerless permit, residents or non-residents.
Is that the standard? It'll stay $50 for
That stays $50 for the non-residents and $15 for the residents.
But you would be able to have a non-resident hunt your own land, and then you could, at your option, buy the non-resident deer permit.
You could get a hunt-owned land permit as a non-resident, and but that would not include this
Right.
combo permit.
Okay.
That's only for the people coming in.
Does anybody else have any questions of Lloyd?
Just like, I mean, even though it's still listed here, but you're not going to be able to buy just the antler deer for 300. You
That's
buy
correct.
the
You could not
combination
buy that
as
this
a
year.
non-resident. Okay.
All right, we vote on this. So I think we have to have, somebody has to make a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Sheila?
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Pass 5-0.
All right, Lloyd. Take the next one.
Okay, the next regulation in the hearing is KAR 115-4-4. This is a permanent regulation. This regulation remains in effect as it currently is until it is changed. And we have a proposal for you to, and recommendations for you to act upon. We've gone through a process to get to this point, and I'll cover a little bit of that. The guiding principles on the process that we went through, Keith gave us some marching orders, so to speak, and he, of course, it was listen to the public and review, make sure that we had a simplified and clarified regulation, protect the resource, and then ask ourselves what parts of the regulation are essential for deer management, and to avoid personal types of opinions, and also we've always done it this way, types of mindsets. Our desire was to allow people more flexibility in their choices and to use language that would be enforceable. We had some items in there and suggestions for changes that included items like foot-pounds of energy and nanometers of light wavelength and things like that really were not enforceable. So we tried to exclude those types of items. We went through the regulations a couple of times, many times, and discussed it. We have had people come to the commission and request to be able to use equipment such as a transmitter arrow, an arrow that would have a detachable transmitter. So if they shot a deer, they would be able to find that deer even if they lost the blood trail or other means of following the deer. We've made a change in our regulation that would allow electronic equipment such as rangefinders, cameras, and also these radio frequency location devices to be attached. And the transmitter would be attached to the arrow in that case. Now let's see. that's one of the items that is in there. I'm only going to hit the high spots here for convenience. One of the areas that this does it on muzzle loaders, it drops to just a single specification, and that would be 0.4 inches in diameter or bore for muzzleloader rifles, pistols, and muskets. For archery, we eliminated items, all draw weights. We tried to reduce those and eliminate those from this regulation. We had eliminated draw weights for the equipment to be used on deer a number of years ago, and we have not seen a marked change in the equipment that people use after we did that, nor have we had any reports of problems associated with changing that regulation. On firearms, that's on page 2. It starts on page 2. For many years, our regulation was the bullet larger than 23 inches in diameter and a cartridge case length of 1.28 inches in length. The recommendation that we have is to eliminate that type of language. Where that really got us into some problems with people were some of the people coming and requesting to use pistols or handguns that didn't meet that qualification, but met qualifications in states that even used regulations such as foot-pounds of energy. Our recommendation is to have any center fire rifle or handgun. And there are numerous other states that have similar types of regulations. We reviewed that as well. We eliminated the draw weight on crossbows, and on shotgun and slug, we just said shotgun and slug and removed the gauge and distinctions for different gauges with different species of big game. And one of the items that we have added is that we have added a restriction or a prohibition on the use of amplifying scopes, optical scopes that amplify visible light or detect infrared or thermal energy. These would be scopes that basically could be used at night. And we've clarified some other language as far as the prohibitions on chemicals and other. One of the other items that this regulation had run into in the past problems, we had a section in there that required the permittee to have in possession hunting equipment that was authorized for the most restrictive big game permit that they might have in possession. We've eliminated that language altogether. In other words, if you're out hunting for another species or something, the fact that you have an archery permit wouldn't prohibit you from carrying other types of equipment, which goes sort of hand in hand with some of the other changes that have occurred in recent years that allow people to carry target arrows while they're archery hunting, and also to possess handguns during a big game season, even handguns that could not be used to take deer. They could still carry that type of equipment. That's sort of in a blurred nutshell is the proposal in front of you. Are there any questions?
Well, first of all, any questions from the commission? Any comments?
I'd like to hear from the public, I think, first.
That'll be fine. Are there any comments from the public? Please come and address the group.
Good evening. Steve Sorensen. I'm with the Kansas Wildlife Federation out of Valley Center. You should have, all the commissioners and Secretary Jennison should have received a letter from our president last week outlining our concerns with the elimination of the caliber restrictions, so I'm not going to go over all of that. I do have a question, Lloyd, on page 4 under accessories, item number 5. Any range this is for firearms. Any range finding device, if the device does not project visible light toward the target, may be used. Is that included, a rangefinder in a scope?
If the range, I would say that if the rangefinder is in the scope, yes, it would be included there.
Well, then my comments are going to be as an official scorer for both Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, and you're about to authorize equipment that will not allow trophies to be certified, a trophy to be certified in Kansas using legal equipment. Boone and Crockett will not certify a trophy if it's taken with a rangefinder in a scope. Also won't certify a trophy taken with the bullet compensator Eliminator 2, I think they're called now, or some brands are anyway. And Pope and Young will not certify a trophy if it's taken with a rangefinder attached to the bow, of which you are about to propose to do. So not every deer in the state of Kansas is a trophy deer, but you're setting up the situation in which a guy's going to take a trophy and find out he's using legal equipment in Kansas but can't certify it. And that's probably going to be disappointing. I mean, it'll be a high-ranking number in the state books of Kansas, but the value isn't going to come high unless, I don't know if BTR allows rangefinders in scopes, but I would recommend that you eliminate those two items for firearms and for archery. So, thanks.
Members of the Commission, I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Brent Gardner, and I am the Legislative Liaison for the National Rifle Association here in the state of Kansas. I'd like to say how encouraged we are to see this type of presentation before you tonight. The issues that are being addressed in this regulation address issues that NRA has worked on across the country for a very, very long time. I'd like to address them in kind of two separate areas. First of all, the any centerfire size. Certainly, modern bullet construction has changed a lot of the old adages, a lot of the old concerns when it came to the effectiveness of the smaller caliber rounds. The expansion has allowed us to be able to adjust the caliber to the person who's out there hunting. And when we talk about some of the largest concerns that we all share as hunters, the bigger things are going to be recruitment and retention. And not just recruitment focused across the broad range, but really on a couple of very specific areas where we've seen the greatest opportunity for growth within our sport. And that's going to be amongst younger folks and amongst women, the two largest growing factors when it comes to hunting across the board. The ability for these folks to be able to shoot a lower recoil firearm as an unqualified, very new hunter gives them a greater opportunity to have enjoyment and create a lifelong hunter out of these individuals. Offering the full range of firearm, the full range of calibers like this, gives them the opportunity to choose what's best for them. In other states where we've seen similar legislation or similar regulatory changes take place, we've not experienced any challenges. There have been no changes and there's been no marked efforts to be able to change those things back. In fact, in many of these instances, it's been incredibly successful. And we have a number of stories that we feature throughout our magazines and have been the experience of folks within our hunter development department where they've found that this has really had a dramatic impact on our ability to recruit young folks. Second, I'd like to talk about the inclusion of crossbows. This is a nationwide effort that continues to grow, and there's a lot of support for it. Here in Kansas is one of the states where we've received the greatest input from our members to work on this issue at the regulatory and the statutory level to try and find a way to make this a part of what you can do here in Kansas. In the 22 states that have allowed unqualified use of universal recognition of crossbows for hunting during the deer archery season, we've seen no problems. The reason that we have, that we're so certain about that is in many of these states, the concerns that are expressed oftentimes by bow hunters and by traditional bow hunters require them to be able to take very specific actions to track the use of crossbows when they enter into the seasons. The thing that we look at closest, of course, is going to be the success rates of field, because that's going to affect the management that we have of the wildlife population. And we've found through our research and through the reports that have been available from the more than 22 states that have enacted it or that have begun enacting it within this year, is that there is no statistical difference between the success rates of individuals using vertical compound bows and crossbows. So ultimately, what does this mean to us? Why do we work on this? We think it comes down to just a couple of important things. First of all, hunter choice. Giving folks an opportunity to use the means of take of their choice is the best way to ensure that individuals who enjoy participating in a sport in a certain way will continue to do so. It's an opportunity for us to take folks who are not currently enticed using the current methods that we have and bring them in. Since we've found, based upon our experience, based upon a pretty nice test study of a nice cross-section of states that have allowed for the use of unqualified crossbow use during their seasons, that there's been no statistical change in the success rate, we think this is a good thing. We think this is a great thing to work for. And lastly, I think we need to talk about the problems that we're trying to address when we're talking about recruitment and retention. Here in Kansas, the replacement rate for hunters who leave the field is 0.71 out of 100. So for every 100 hunters that leave the field permanently, only 71 continue to come in. We face a couple of significant challenges with that. First of all, the long-term issues of budgetary restrictions based upon fewer hunters is going to be something that's very real to us in the future. If you look around this room tonight, the number of folks who are involved in this are mainly of a certain age group. And that continues to change every year, and it continues to get older. We want to find new ways to bring these folks in. I think this is going to be a very successful endeavor for Kansas. States like Michigan experienced almost a $1 million increase in their their Pittman-Robertson funds from new license sales. Again, I think this is a great opportunity. I'm very encouraged that the Commission's taking a look at this. And on behalf of the members of the National Rifle Association, I'd like you to encourage to vote for this and support it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Tell me, in your research, how many states allow this?
22.
22.
22, if you're speaking about crossbows.
No, I'm talking about the any caliber.
Oh, the centerfire?
Mm-hmm.
I would have to look back at my research on that. I don't know if Chris knows that off the top of his head.
Lloyd provided that. I think Lloyd sent an email the other day providing that, and it was like 35.
It's pretty significant.
Any centerfire, I'd have to find it.
I don't have the number, but I know that the map is
It is 35 that allow either 22 caliber or any center fire.
Okay.
And 7 states require 23 caliber or larger. 7 states, I hope I said 7 there. 7 states also do not allow rifles and require shotgun and slug.
Right.
And Hawaii didn't reply back.
And they often don't. I think the big thing to focus on when we're talking about caliber, first of all, we have not seen any complaints from any of these states. Second of all, the ultimate goal when we're talking about the caliber of choice used by a hunter is we want those folks to be able to recover that deer or that any type of game that they're hunting. And to do that, we want to make sure that we can line them up as best as we can with the appropriate caliber for them. And in some instances, I mean, certainly the .223 round is an incredibly popular round for deer hunting in a number of very, very big game states. And, you know, we continue to see that as something that a lot of those folks who, again, were not involved before, perhaps because there wasn't a caliber that was proper for them, may start with that caliber and continue to move up. I know, for instance, I'm not someone who enjoys necessarily shooting a smaller caliber. I can handle a larger caliber. But my girlfriend, who just started deer hunting, certainly enjoys the opportunity to shoot that round. And fortunately, she's a better shot than I am, so she does a really nice job with that.
Does anybody have the stats on a lot of these other states? These 35 other states have probably been in place for a number of years, I'm assuming. We've had the inclusion of the 17 caliber in the last few years in this. They're probably not including the 17 caliber, or they are including the 17 caliber. Any centerfire?
The any centerfire states would be, I think
And
the only
those are all 35, is that correct?
35 that are 22 or any centerfire. So like Montana is any centerfire, right?
In Missouri.
In Missouri, okay.
2 nearby ones.
I would
don't
also
know.
include that moreover, hunters by and large, that are involved in these sports, take a great deal of care in making sure that their equipment is appropriate for what they're doing. I think we have not experienced large numbers of folks, for instance, looking to hunt whitetail with a 17 HMR. I think, certainly most individuals would want to be able to make sure that the rifle that they have is appropriate for the game that they're hunting. And I think hunters, by and large, are very trustworthy when it comes to assessing their equipment and making sure that it's appropriate.
Well, and I absolutely agree. I think the argument we're probably going to hear tonight, if we hear an argument, is going to be the 17 and 22 caliber side of it. And, we're in a unique situation because we've got to simplify it for the hunters in the state of Kansas, certainly for the non-resident hunters. We've got to simplify it for law enforcement.
Certainly.
Yet we've got to be a good steward of the outdoors. Now, if you've got 35 states currently that allow centerfire, and I guess Montana is a great example because if Montana allows any centerfire to be used, and they
get some big game in that
harvest a lot more big game than we do. It makes some sense, but whether it makes sense to me personally or you personally, we're going to have to educate the people that are going to come up here and give them a reason why.
Certainly, and I think anytime we're looking at a change like this, it's important to do that. And that's why I think taking a look at some of the significant changes that have occurred in these states, as they've made these transitions, they've made the transition and it has not been an issue. So we do have a case study where when we talk about the surrounding states that also harvest a significant portion of big game, where they have not seen an issue with this, I think that stands as more than just an opportunity for us to take a look at the hypotheticals of what could happen and instead look at what actually has happened. We have these great case studies that we can look at, and we can see that, to my knowledge, there's never been, and in our research, there's never been a state that has gone to center fire that has ever attempted to go back and repeal that or alter it. And I think that case study stands as something that is stronger than perhaps what we may be afraid of our fears. The truth of what we've seen may help allay those fears.
People will try to use something that they believe is going to be effective, and I don't think you're going to have people going out and buying a centerfire 17.
Right.
They're not, as far as the centerfire. Chris, do you have anything to add in some of your research?
I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that the only 17 caliber centerfire that I know of is a 17 Fireball, not to be confused with a 17 HMR or there's one other 17 Mach 2, which are rim fires.
Right. Centerfire is a really high dollar gun.
Right.
And that's where I was kind of going with this a little bit, is I think there is some confusion that people do believe that a 17 rimfire is something that's going to be able to be used in taking deer.
Right.
And I think the economic benefits are great. I think the potential for getting the youth involved, which I'm 110% for all the time, is great. I think that this is probably a good thing. It's just, I think we need to explain it in the simplest of terms that we've never done it before, but there's a lot of things we've never done before.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that we've done for 100 years that maybe aren't right anymore. and we're trying to change that, and I think we're trying to change it in a positive way. I just want to make sure that everybody understands completely what we're doing.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of my constituents and I had this discussion, and he feels like Don does, and he had a suggestion of just in your brochure or whatnot, maybe a statement of some sort to encourage people to make sure they're aware of the right caliber, that we're not endorsing one caliber over another. But I think that the people who choose to use a 223, for example, while I think they will be few in number, they will generally be done in a situation that I think they will use good judgment. The risk, I suppose, is that it may be appealing to some entry-level hunters. I know recoil was a factor when my daughter began to hunt. Although she shot does for the first several years, so there was, it probably wouldn't be that big an issue. But there might be a suggestion of having some cautionary word in bold print or something encouraging people to use the right caliber. I just don't think you're going to have that many people using it. But probably shouldn't direct my conversation to you because you and I are on the same page. So does anybody else have any questions for this person? Okay, thank you. Is there any other, Mike?
Questions for him? What was your name again?
Brent Gardner.
G-A-R-D-N-E-R?
Yes.
Where are you from?
Fairfax, Virginia.
Did you come out just for this?
Fortunately, our business in Kansas at the legislature already had me here. But I did plan on staying here for this, yes.
Okay. How long has the NRA been into trying to get the crossbow? Years ago, we had some meetings trying to figure out how to get organized to fight the anti-hunting movement. The NRA would not get involved. They said, no, we're a gun rights group. And now you guys are one of the leading groups pushing this.
Sure. Well, it's a number of years ago, and I couldn't give you the exact date, but I could provide that for you at some point. We've been involved in this for a number of years. I think ultimately, we as a hunting community, as a gun hunting community, we share a lot more than we have that are different. I think certainly we all face a significant threat from groups like HSUS who have hunters in their crosshairs. I mean, there's no question about that. And ultimately, whether an individual chooses to use a rifle, a muzzle loader, a crossbow, or a vertical bow, for all of our rights and to maintain the robustness of this activity, it's essential that we make sure that we are as inclusive as we can be, as long as it's in no way detrimental to the existing sports that we enjoy. And it's been our experience, based upon the case study that's existed in states from this type of legislation, that there's a net positive impact to this. It brings new people into the sport, keeps older people in the sport, and offers an additional level of choice for folks that want to get involved, to where they can, if they enjoy it, if this is the area that they're best with or that they most enjoy, that they have an opportunity to enjoy the sport in their way. So, thank you.
Okay, do we have some more questions, comments? Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name's Chuck Haggard, from Topeka, Kansas. I have, in recent years, taken up deer hunting again, and in the past few years had been meaning to write a proposal supporting things like the 22 caliber center fires. This would, of course, make that effort kind of moot. I came to the talk in support of this change in the legal equipment, primarily the rifle portion of it, although I think the crossbow part is pretty neat because I've never been a bow hunter. I've never had the time to get good with a traditional bow. A crossbow might be something that I could get into. The language in doing away with some of the restrictions on the centerfire cartridges, I think, is a good thing. I could argue, I know that there's some concerns with going to a smaller caliber. However, part of my background is I'm a firearms instructor, been a police officer for 26 years. I have a military background, and wound ballistics is one of the things that I have put a great deal of study into. One can make very, very good choices in a .223 rifle, as an example, in bullet construction, and because of the low recoil and the accuracy of the weapon, you're able to make a very accurate shot, harvest your deer. There are other traditional deer calibers in which I can go out and pick very poor bullets that are commercially available, go to the store, buy the wrong box of ammunition. If I use something that's very traditional in Kansas, such as a .243, which everybody would agree is a pretty good deer round, but if I make a bad choice in bullets commercially available off the shelf, then I very much risk wounding a deer as opposed to collecting a deer. So more than the caliber restrictions, educating our hunters on what is a good choice for a deer bullet. Bullet construction and the accuracy of your shot placement is vastly more important than what caliber you're shooting. As written, this would allow people who use, like I know a good half a dozen young men with military experience who are in their early 20s who own AR-15s but don't have any other centerfire rifle, that under these regulations I could take them deer hunting and they have an interest in that without having to buy a new rifle. The way the regulation is currently written, it disallows, like it would allow a .357 Magnum revolver. That would be specifically allowed by the regulation. But a 10mm handgun, which is significantly more powerful than a .357 Magnum, would be disallowed under the current regulations because the case length is about 1/10 of an inch too short. That just doesn't make sense when you really look at the capability of those two cartridges, just as an example. I know that there will be people who, again, express concern with the smaller calibers, but with my wound ballistics background, I could pull out charts and diagrams and show you that with the proper bullet choice, a .223 actually has more wounding potential than some rounds such as a .30-30. And I don't think anybody would argue that a .30-30 isn't a good deer caliber, been in use for almost 100 years. So I think this is a good move in allowing hunters more choice in what they are able to use. And as the gentleman from the NRA said, given younger hunters, smaller built hunters, choices that would give them lower recoil and the ability to be more accurate, I think they'd be more likely to harvest their deer.
Thanks. Any questions for Mr. Haggard?
Just simply, I appreciate your comments coming from your background and experience, because I too am hearing the 22 caliber and the 17, and I think there's such a big misconception of what we're trying to do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it just, what it does, it just includes.
Okay, Marvin Whitehead, Kansas Bowhunters Association, and I think you're all well aware of my personal position, but so I won't bore you. Won't bore you too much with that, but one of our members, our legislative rep from, had fully intended to express his concerns. He got called away on an emergency, so he asked me to read his letter to you. It says, in response to the proposed crossbow regulations, gentlemen, it is my understanding that the department is considering opening up crossbow hunting throughout the state to all hunters through the entire archery season, basically treating crossbows the same as bows, as conventional bows for all intents and purposes. I have been asked by the Kansas Bowhunters Association to present our position to the department on this proposed regulation, as well as to lobby on their behalf before the legislature should that become necessary. I see a number of problems with the proposed regulation. First and foremost, involves safety issues that no one seems to have addressed. My understanding is that the department previously decided that a hunter safety course was not necessary for bow hunters. If the regulation passes, I assume that would apply to crossbow hunters as well. Following a meeting with Chris Tymason, during which he indicated that he had gone to a local retailer to try out a crossbow just to see what it was like, I thought I should do the same so that I would have a better understanding of exactly what these weapons are really like. I found that they are more akin to a rifle than a bow. The crossbow I tried had a scope, similar to a rifle scope, a trigger mechanism, also similar to a rifle. While carrying the weapon in the field, it would be loaded with a bolt and it would be ready to fire when the safety was disengaged, similar to a rifle with a bullet in the chamber. One manufacturer of crossbows, whose site I visited on the internet, even brags that their trigger is so sensitive that it would make the buyer's rifle jealous. I should also point out that crossbow hunters would be allowed, under the regulations, to dress as archers are dressed during their archery season, in full camo suits with no requirement that they wear hunter orange. The liability issues alone should dissuade the department from considering this regulation. There will be serious accidents and deaths as a result of allowing this dangerous practice in the field. I, for one, will not be interested in hunting public grounds during archery season. I have no interest in walking into a public hunting area where a crossbow hunter might be sitting, who has no hunter safety training, concealed from my view, with a weapon cocked and ready to fire at the first sign of a warm-blooded animal. I am not alone. Many of the bow hunters with whom I have visited are inclined to avoid hunting in Kansas at all if this regulation passes. It's just simply not worth the risk. I don't believe I have to go into detail on what kind of liability issues this regulation would raise for not only the state, but landowners that allow untrained hunters to go into their property with this kind of weapon, as well as outfitters. Our next concern is for the resource. I have surveyed a number of bow hunters and found that their experience in the field this last year was much the same as mine. We noted a dramatic decline in the deer numbers, and especially healthy deer numbers. The drought our state has experienced over the last couple of years has seriously impacted the deer population. I have to feel your biologist would agree. The infusion of what could well be a large group of new hunters into the field over an extended period of time, the entire archery season, would have devastating consequences. It is also apparent that many of the hunters who want to see this regulation passed are rifle hunters eager to extend their season with weapons with which they are more accustomed, and they want the opportunity to hunt throughout the rut. Again, the harm to the resource could well be irreparable, with more hunters in the field for an extended period of time, hunting a dwindling population of deer. Following reaction taken last year regarding crossbows, the following appeared in one of the proponents' internet conversations. Great news. Congratulations. The old bastions are falling. We are not falling. We still have faith in the department to do the right thing. We are asking the department to stand for hunter safety and the health of the resource. It is our belief that it would be irresponsible to the point of negligence to allow crossbow hunting by all hunters during the entire archery season. Respectfully submitted, John L. Hampton.
Okay, thank you.
And if you ask me any questions, I would just have to suppose what he would say. So.
Okay, thanks.
But anyhow, like I say, I think I've talked to you guys enough on my personal opinions that, if you're not aware of them by now, you never will be.
I do know and respect them. Are there any other public comments?
May I ask a question? Lloyd or Chris could probably. So it's true the bow hunters don't have to take hunters? I just assumed they did.
No. If you're any hunter born after July 1st, 1957 has to have hunter education before they can hunt in the state.
Even if it's just with a bow or with
just
a
it
crossbow?
doesn't matter.
Yes. So that's not true.
Correct.
Yes.
crossbow. Okay. I understand.
However, if the concern is safety that has to do with crossbows because of their similarity to firearms, almost all the hunter safety has to do with firearms, so that one would think that that would negate some of the issues.
You would think the same issues would apply. You would think that just like a rifle, you don't walk around with a bow cocked and loaded with a bolt in it. I would think that a safe, ethical hunter would wait till they get to their stand, then load their bow, as opposed to walking in the field with it. That would be crazy.
So that I understand how bows, we were talking about just a second ago, as I understand how bows or how crossbows would work, they could be used at any time a gun is legal, at any time that archery is legal.
That's the way this is
That's the way
written.
it's proposed.
It's legal equipment. There's an archery season and they may be used. And if it's a gun season, they may be used. Although right now, all archery is always available to be used during gun season. So it's just a different, an expanded type of weapon to be used in archery as a replacement. If you can use a bow, you can use a crossbow. Whereas right now, you can use a crossbow only during firearm season and with medical and in certain units and on and on. Mike?
I think, Gerald, you're right. It's different. It's kind of like the computer. It's different.
Mike?
Well, I have a question is, if we're removing poundage and caliber, why do we still have a minimum on muzzle loaders?
Fair question, Mike. And some of this, we also have a width on a broadhead, and these are items that we left in. They might be something that might be taken out later, et cetera, in some other year.
I'm not
These are.
I'm just wondering why.
We tried to address most of them, and we easily could have left some of them out. We reviewed, for example, with the muzzle loader, we also looked at the .410 shotgun and the .40 caliber pistol, and that's really where we came back to that level, and we thought these were items that we felt we would stick with, and so we stuck with a .40 caliber muzzle loader, as opposed to leaving it wide open for someone with your squirrel rifle.
Okay, and another question is, I want to know why the change. A year ago, you opposed crossbows in the legislature to the point that you kind of came up with a compromise on the 4 units and the 2-year that you were going to give it like a study, and another part of it was the 15 and under and the 55 and older. Why the change from 1 year to another? And, I mean, you say you're going to do it one way for 2 years, and then after 1 year, you guys are saying, "Oh, the hell with that. Let's just go anyway."
Mike, from my perspective, number one, I think that the decision last time was fairly close on a vote, although we can, would have been close if we didn't have the pressure from what I perceived as the legislature. And over the last year, this has brought crossbows into more conversation, and I have had a lot more people talk to me about crossbows, and the number of proponents in my particular case has surfaced dramatically. People who, in Woodson County and Shawnee County, people where I talked to, there has been a lot more interest in crossbows and a lot more favorable opinion and appreciation for their inclusion and more opportunity.
Per my memory, the 2-year study and the 2 years of any units was actually dictated by the legislature, was it not? We really didn't do that as a commission.
That wasn't part of a,
That's right.
Well,
because the
kind of it was.
legislature was going for statewide.
Let me, if I can address that, Mr. Chairman. You know, our position hasn't changed legislatively, which was last year we opposed crossbows, and the reason was because we have regulatory authority to do it ourselves. The testimony that I drafted for that hearing and turned in that was canceled was the exact same. We opposed the legislature mandating crossbows, and it's really about a legislative mandate, not about using the tool during the deer season.
And Mike, the 2-year study, you know, as you remember, last year at the end of the session, there were a variety of things put into one bill. And there was a real, we had a couple of issues that we really wanted passed. There was a real desire on the part of the House to have full inclusion of the crossbows. And we had prevailed in the Senate to not do anything with crossbows and let us do it. And to get the final bill passed, that 2-year study was the compromise between the two houses to get them to vote on the rest of the stuff that we wanted. And so that's how the 2-year study came about. And it is not through, but you know, as we talked last year, I mean, the issue with crossbows for our department is it's a societal issue. I mean, it's a difficult issue for us because of our constituents are certainly divided on it. I think, and Lloyd, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we ever thought it was a biological issue, did we, from the standpoint of crossbows? So it's never been a biological issue, but that's not to say that it's not a very important and controversial issue because of who our constituents are and the feedback that the commission gets. And so I don't think that we have changed our view. The study was a compromise last year at the final days of the legislature to do a number of things. Let the House get what they want, let the Senate get half of what they want, let us get some pretty important legislation that got hung up with those two.
So why wasn't this pushed earlier through the commission like this?
You mean last year?
Last year, the year before?
I think again last year it was a societal issue again. I don't, you know, I don't think we wanted to get the whole ball all at one time, get it out there, see how it works. And I think we've had an opportunity to observe that. From my standpoint, I think pretty, not everybody pretty well understands my position. You know, I want people to have the opportunity to get in the field, and so I never did have a problem with it. I don't think the crossbows takes away from anybody's experience that wants to use a conventional bow. So I don't know why we'd want to dictate that somebody that wanted to use a crossbow wouldn't. And from the standpoint of the department, I think Lloyd explained it fairly well, is we looked at it, the instructions that he said Keith had given them to look at it and make a sound decision, try to step back, take some of the personal, you know, our personal views aside, and how can we make our regulations more easily understood? How can we get regulations in place that we don't have to go and modify every time somebody comes out with some new technology? And that was kind of, in short, what Lloyd said, but I think was really the general direction that we wanted to go with it.
Question for the commissioner. Gerald said he heard far more requests wanting to legalize it in opposition to it. Is that something that all 5 of you also got correspondence and talking to people?
No. Mine was the other way. I had 3 proponents of these regulations, and I probably had phone calls, emails, and face-to-face conversations with people, probably 33 individuals that was on the other side of this issue that weren't proponents of this regulation.
So you had more that opposed this? Okay.
Yes.
Roger?
Certainly the letters were more letters were against it. The againers were way ahead. And when I took the topic out and asked people what they thought about it, just depending if you're a bow hunter, you're against it. Everyone else was pretty much okay with it. or didn't have an opinion.
And that's mine too. The emails we get, of course, usually are from a niche constituent, and the emails themselves were probably negative. But I literally, in the last month and a half, in general conversations with people who I knew hunted, and I asked on the caliber restriction going away, and I asked on crossbows. I did probably have at least 1, 2, 3 different individuals that came up and thanked me for allowing to use crossbows that were older, and I didn't even start that conversation. The others that I asked, I have to say most of them said it really honestly didn't make them any difference because it wasn't going to choose or wasn't going to make them choose differently.
I think I get the same, we all pretty much get the same emails from the same proponents, opponents, and I would say mine was probably more even as far as proponents and opponents, but I'm going to tell you what I'm going to rely on the crossbow issue singularly more than anything else is Commissioner Dill, simply because he's an avid bow hunter. I mean, he's not a gun hunter, he's an avid bow hunter. And we've all seen how he legislates. I hate to use that word anymore, but I will. And he's asked a lot of good questions. We've all asked a lot of good questions. And if a guy like that can support an issue that's that near and dear to his heart and make that decision publicly, I think this is something that we absolutely don't know what the downside is, and we don't know what the upside is yet. That's why I would encourage, and I'm glad you brought this issue up, Mike, because I was going to ask Lloyd, and I was going to suggest this as part of the approval, that we take that. We had a 2-year study that we were going to do. We're 1 year into that study. I'd like to make that 2 more years of the study on crossbows. And we then, because there's nothing to say that this commission can't change their mind. Hell, we've changed our minds a lot of times since I've been here. And we've reversed things that we've done, and we've compromised on other things we've done. So if there's truly that much of a negative effect, and I truly do not think there will be, but if there is a negative effect and we have another 2 years worth of study, there's nothing wrong with revisiting it and looking at it again. And Lloyd, I'd like to ask you this. How many people were on the deer committee?
There's actually, I think there's 11 if we include, yeah, I'll say 11.
Was it a unanimous decision to give this recommendation?
No, not. No.
That's the most encouraging thing I've heard tonight.
Okay. Back to the commission. Any more?
I got a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't aware that Pope and Young wouldn't recognize a trophy status of an animal if it had a rangefinder in your scope. I think that deserves some attention. We need to do something about that. Because if we pass that regulation as it is and this stands, there's going to be some people that's really going to be unhappy that they shot a real nice deer or whatever.
But only if they had a rangefinder in their scope.
Well, then they become ineligible, and they don't know that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could address that quickly.
Any electronic device attached to your motor.
Right. So.
Lighted Knox, Tony.
A lot of people don't know that, but that is one of the questions that gets asked on the application.
I want to point out that's already current law. So people could use a rangefinder in their scope now. That's not a new proposal.
I understand that, but they're not going to have a trophy if they do that.
Well, I would also counter that we don't manage on Pope and Young standards. They have or a Boone and Crockett standard where they have a percentage let off, which my bow, my Matthews, right, is an 80% let off, I think, or 75% let off, which I don't think qualifies for Pope and Young. So, oh, well, I guess they changed that to meet the specifications of the equipment, so.
Modern Army.
Okay, Robert, do you have another?
Yes. This is going to apply to elk hunting also. And I think you ought to really give a lot of consideration to that. If we're going to do these caliber designations and the crossbow and the reduced weight on the bow and everything else that we're doing here, those elk have to be taken into consideration too. And I haven't heard anybody say anything about elk hunting.
Does Montana have elk? I mean, in the 35 states that have the liberal, generous description on centerfires, Robert, I just can't see people using too small a caliber. You can use a .243 on elk in about any states now, but there are just so few people who would. And I just don't think people are going to be using these inappropriate calibers. If they do, they probably would not be very successful with any caliber, in my opinion.
Doug Phelps from Manhattan. One point of clarification, Commissioner Wilson brought up elk, and we've been talking about eliminating the draw weight minimums for bow hunting. The minimum draw weight for hunting elk was retained at the time that we dropped it for all other bow hunting. So to say that anybody can go out there with a bow of whatever, it isn't true. We've maintained that for the very reason that they're a much larger, much heavier boned animal than a whitetail, and the commission at that time deemed it prudent to retain, correct me, I think it's 50 pounds.
50 pounds.
50 ounces. It's been a while, so I think when they get ready to say, well, this is all, been changed to do that. Well, not all of it necessarily has been changed, and there was some reasoned thinking behind that. And I think, there needs to be some reasoned thinking behind the rest of these changes that are being proposed. Thank you.
Chris, since there's only, right in the middle of Mountain Dew, that'll teach you. Since there's only 5 of us here tonight, does it take 3 to pass or 4 to pass?
3 to pass. Takes a quorum to operate and a majority, simple majority to pass.
Mike?
Robert, if I can make you feel any better, I've talked to a lot of elk hunters. I drew a permit. I talked to everybody that had a permit the previous 2 seasons before I did. If somebody in Kansas is blessed with an elk permit, they put all the best equipment they can get. The smallest caliber I ever heard of anybody using was a .270. Probably over half of the elk have been shot with a 30-06. You're right, it's a totally different animal. Fort Riley produces some of the largest body sizes of any elk killed in the nation. But it's such a special deal. It's not like a deer where you're going to grab a buddy that say, hey, let's go this weekend. Well, all I've got is a .22-250. But drawing an elk permit in Kansas is such a special deal that, I have no doubt, like most of us, when we draw our elk permit, we got to go buy a new rifle.
338.
And I've talked to some people that have bought 338, bought 300 Win Mags. It's just different. We almost consider ourselves a fraternity. And I really don't think you're going to see many people. And another thing, they've got so much time to plan for it. You draw in the summertime, and then you can't start hunting. But you're absolutely right that the smaller animal, I would not want to try to take one down with a .223. But most of the people I know have, like I said, the .270 is the smallest I know of. And I shot mine with a 30-06 5 times in about 3 seconds. But you have a valid concern, but I think it's just such a special deal that people really make sure that, at least in Kansas, they make sure that they're well armed.
I'm going to start moving towards, see if we can't get a motion here.
Are we going to, and like to say I'd hate to interrupt you, but I do it so often. What difference does that make?
I'm not sensitive to it.
Yeah. Is anyone opposed to continuing the study for 2 more years? I guess your shot, Lloyd.
Yeah, I don't think that we would be opposed to any additional research. I can't imagine myself or my replacement being opposed to any additional research.
You're not going.
Wait a minute, who's replacing you?
So, no, I don't know what we'll be able to do financially and that way, but if we're talking about continuing to monitor the harvest, we're going to do that anyway.
I just like to gather whatever data we're gathering now. We gathered the first year. I would like to continue to gather. I wouldn't want it to be any more or any less.
I think that's standard procedure with us. So,
I think that makes some sense, that, you know, we're saying, you know, we think it's okay, but Don says if we find it's wrong, well, then we'll try to come back and change it. So if it's important to us, let's try to analyze it and count it and see if it made a difference. See if it made a negative or a positive difference or no difference.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just in relation to that, that was in another reg that we passed late last year as a result of the legislative mandate. So as that regulation moves forward, which is 115.25(9)A, I'll add that section back in where we're mandating a permit that you get or authorization number if you're going to hunt with a crossbow. If that's the direction you guys want to go in, we'll continue that program. That way we get mandatory monitoring.
It makes some sense to do that.
But it won't be in this, it'll be in that reg. I can't.
I think we need to continue to keep gathering the information so that we can, on harvest and herd health. And not only that, but even the new calibers as such. And I know, you captured this information probably for the last 10 or 12 years on the surveys and other information, who uses what calibers, et cetera. So, I can't envision us not continuing to do that. At some point, if we've done the regulation, and I'm not saying we would, but if we really felt like there was a detriment to herd health or whatever, we may very well restrict the number of permits that get issued. We may or may not have to go back to a draw. That gives us the luxury of doing that if it's been regulated rather than by statute. So I'm all in favor of keeping as much information as possible.
Well, I guess my only question is, do you want to continue the mandate to have a authorization number, which I'll have to prepare for the June meeting if this passes, or Lloyd continues to collect that data anyway?
I think it would be better. I'd rather volunteer Lloyd.
Okay.
I think everybody's got a lot of confidence in Lloyd's ability.
Lloyd just said he was retiring.
He ain't gonna retire.
Oh, that's one thing we will deny. Is retire.
Yeah, we have to accept the
Denied.
resignation.
Yeah, denied.
All right. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded that we approve this as presented. Any more discussion from the commission?
Commissioner, I would like to make a comment. I promise not to do this often, but I think sometimes we do need to explain our vote. This deer herd is a treasure to Kansas, and I think I don't even never speak for other commissioners, but I think we value it as a treasure. We've all spent a lot of time trying to educate ourselves in what this law will do to impact that herd and that treasure. What I've learned in life is to look at things, first of all, scientifically, biologically speaking, get the facts first. So how will this law affect the population, the quality and the quantity of the deer? I've learned that in 1965 we had about 34,000 deer in this state, and it peaked out at about 600,000 a couple years ago. And we can spend the rest of the night arguing whether there's 500 or 550,000 deer right now, but I don't think anyone can convince me there's only 200,000 or 300,000 deer. But I agree the deer herd's been hurt the past couple years. I don't think that the passage of this will impact the population. I think the people I talked to were rifle hunters that are going to now try a crossbow or something like that, but they only get to still shoot one buck per year, and rather than shooting in rifle season, they're going to maybe shoot it earlier in the season. And what's it going to do to the quality of the deer? I don't know. I don't know that yet. But I think the science would point that this is not going to impact it. I agree with all those people who have concerns about the smaller calibers but I've taken so many people deer hunting. The biggest issue was their gun sighted in or not, as opposed to the caliber of the weapon. And that's the bigger issue. So scientifically, I don't think this is going to hurt the population any. Next, I look at things sociologically speaking. There are so many different groups of people that interact with the deer population. Bow hunters, rifle hunters, muzzleload hunters, naturalists, people that drive cars, insurance companies, and even the government officials interact with the deer different sociologically than hunters do. I'm a bow hunter. If I was here representing the bow hunters of America, I would be against this, but unfortunately I have to represent all the citizens of Kansas with this issue. The third way I would look at the problem is politically speaking. I can assure you that if I thought biologically speaking this would hurt the deer population, regardless of what I thought the legislature might or might not do, I would never, I can never see myself cowering to the legislators over this issue. That being said, I also realize that we get our power from the legislature, and if anyone doesn't like what we do here, they can still go that route, and that's their constitutional right. But putting those three factors together, I've come to the conclusion it would be in the best interest to proceed with this. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Roger. Any more discussion? Any more discussion from the public? Let's call it.
Okay, Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Passed 5-0.
You still up?
Yes, I am. A couple more items. This is Regulation 115.18.7, and it basically changes the language in that regulation that deals with equipment that people with disabilities may use, the equipment they may use. It does the same thing. It eliminates the draw weights on crossbows, arrow length, allows the transmitter arrow, prohibits thermal sights, and also any electronic control of the flight of the arrow. Those are the changes in that regulation. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Lloyd? Anybody? Any questions from the public?
Move to approve.
Second.
Sheila?
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Passed 5-0.
Next regulation is our season, deer season dates, bag limits, permits. This is 115.25.9. This is basically the same regulation. It's an exempt regulation. It's the same regulation that we had last year with a few changes. One of the changes is that it creates a pre-rut whitetail antlerless only season, a 2-day season, establishes that. The rest of the changes are basically changing the dates to coincide with the current calendar year. And let's see. That's pretty much all there is as far as differences in this regulation. We're keeping the same number of whitetail antlerless permits, allowing hunters to use them in the same units as we did last year. Are there any questions?
Lloyd, refresh my memory. Was this the 2 years also mandated by the legislature on this whitetail? That's what I was thinking. Okay.
And this is the first of the 2 years.
That's correct.
What happens if we vote against it since it was mandated by the legislature? Don't shake your head, Mr. Secretary.
I don't know that I really want to feel the wrath of that because I would be bearing the brunt of it. I can
No,
appreciate
seriously,
it.
if we voted, if the commission voted against it, would it, then the law be implemented?
Well, this is what would happen. So the legislature gave us, they wanted to mandate a 2-day rut, pre-rut season. And in that process, you negotiate broad language which allows you to set the number of days and set the time period and things like that to give the department and the commission the most flexibility in that process. So that language is not very specific. It just says we're going to have a pre-rut season. If the commission did not implement that, I can almost guarantee next year the legislature would come back and it would be very, very specific. Or we might lose the ability to manage deer, I mean, in a broad sense. So I think that of all the mandates that we've ever received from the legislature, and we've received quite a few, this one's pretty broad to implement how we want.
Once again, if we make a mistake, we can fix it. If the year after they make a mistake, they don't make mistakes. Okay, let's see. Do we have a motion on this? Would somebody make one?
So move.
Second.
The 2-day season, which I didn't particularly like, but I don't think we have much option. Could I have a second?
We did. Tom did, didn't he? You seconded.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I second.
All right, any more discussion? Any more comments from the public? Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'm Rob Poulter here from Topeka. Just one question for Lloyd. I think you mentioned the same days on the seasons and the same units?
The same unit designations for the whitetail antlerless permits and the same total number of permits that a hunter might buy. There's no change in that. The dates of the seasons have been changed based on the new calendar.
Right. Has any thought ever been given to reducing or increasing the amount of units for managing?
Yes, this has been suggested. When we started in '65, we had pretty close to what we have now. There's a strong reason to maintain the integrity of your unit structure. But yes, we have looked at smaller units, larger units, etc.
You don't find it harder to manage large units?
No, not necessarily. We try to collect information. We need to collect information based on the minimum size of a unit that you want to manage for. So if you cut each unit in half, it more than doubles the cost to obtain the information that you need to manage and follow that resource. You still have to collect an adequate sample size from each one of those smaller units, is what I'm saying.
I understand that.
So just because you created it doesn't mean that it will
I would
become
just
better.
like to see us address this problem with the blue tongue and the like going through the, I see it in our area in Nemaha and northern Jackson County.
Mhm.
We've had this 8 years running now, and our population is real low, and yet we still see the same amount of doe permits in that area. Okay, enough
Yeah,
said.
and-
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? Any discussion from the commission? Sheila?
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Passed 5-0.
Last,
Okay, you
last
got
year
one
item.
more?
And this is the secretary's orders. This is kind of appropriate to this previous question. This is the place where we establish the actual permit numbers, whether they're unlimited, for example, with residents. Most of our permits are unlimited except for the either sex firearm permits, and those are in Western units. And then the other permits that are limited are the non-resident permits on the 18 deer management units. We reviewed that. This year, our harvest was about 96,000 deer. Hunters took about 96,000 deer. That's down about 4,000 from where it was, 3,000 from where it was the year before. It's about a 4% decline. This, in considering the other factors with the drought and the disease, we looked at this. We also contacted adjacent states to see what they were doing and how much their population and harvest was down. Our recommendation was to keep the Secretary's orders and the permit numbers the same as they had been last year. And part of that goes to the fact that we are changing a number of other factors this year, both equipment and with the combo permit and also the pre-rut type of season that we have. We did not feel that it was appropriate for us to make a change in those permit numbers, and we did review those numbers, for example, in units 8, 9, and 10, as well as the other units. We did go over that. We do understand that there are some units that have had some downward trends in recent years, and that is reflected in the data that we have, as well as what the hunters are telling us. Our recommendation in the Secretary's orders are to keep the permit numbers the same as they were last year, and then make a change if we need to in the future.
We don't vote on Secretary's orders.
No, it's a concurrence.
All right. Any questions for Lloyd? The public? Mike?
Lloyd, does that mean the non-resident permit numbers will stay the same, or did you have to raise them?
No, they will remain the same as they were last year.
If I'm correct, this is the first time since we've opened the season in '94 then that we haven't seen an increase.
I'm not sure. I think that we had one other year that we did not raise it. Yes, I think there was one other year that we did not raise it. Last year we raised it a small amount.
Yeah, it's been
But-
small since '08.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is the demand by non-residents greater than what we have?
Yes. We have a higher demand than we have permit if you look at it on a unit-by-unit basis. Probably the western 6 or 7 units will have higher demand. The demand exceeds the availability of permits. The total number of permits available for non-residents is greater than the total amount of application demand that occurs. And that's primarily because of the high level of permits in the eastern units. And you might also say that's permit application demand. Those permits are made available as leftovers, and they sell very rapidly after we reopen the the process again. These are not permits that are not taken. All of the permits that we authorized for non-residents were taken and have been taken.
Well, that means you're doing a good job, because there's still a demand for non-resident hunters coming to the state of Kansas.
Yes, there is still a demand to come here.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jim, you next.
Let's see. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, Joseph. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is Regulation 115-4-4A, Wild Turkey Legal Equipment and Taking Methods, on which you'll be voting this evening. There's a couple substantial changes, some of which you've already talked about because they relate to the big game regulations. There's also quite a bit of wordsmithing in here, too, to increase clarity on a few issues. I'm just going to touch on some of the bigger ones for right now, unless you want me to go into more detail. But the big ones are the inclusion of the crossbow into the spring archery-only season for use by anyone. Also, the inclusion of the crossbow for use by anyone into the fall firearms turkey season. The other biggie is shotgun and muzzle-loading shotguns without a gauge restriction. In the past, that's been restricted to 20 gauge and larger. There's also some wording changes in there to specify what types of devices can be attached to bows and crossbows, the same language that you just discussed for the big game regulations. With that, those are the biggies. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Jim or the commission to start with? The public, Mike?
If these would have passed, obviously they would not be available. The changes wouldn't be for the upcoming spring season.
The timing, it would be not in time for the archery season because it's just 10 days away.
Right.
So it would be actually effective probably about 4 weeks from now, is what I'm guessing. It takes about 4 weeks for a regulation to become effective once it's been turned in to the Secretary of State's office and published. Once it's been published, it's 15 days after that publication, but well, obviously we'll have a news release about it, and it'll be on our website.
You have a... Okay. Any more discussion? Yes, sir?
Does it do away with the restriction on shotgun, the size of shotgun?
Yes, it does. Yep.
So you can use the 28 gauge or 14?
That's correct. Yep.
Can I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second? Can I have a second? Can I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Any more discussion from anybody in the audience? Sheila?
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawver?
Yes.
Pass 5-0.
Jim, one more.
Yep. The next one is 115-25-5, which is the fall turkey season bag limit and permits. And we're recommending that the fall turkey season now run from October 1 to January 31, with the exception of during the regular firearms deer season. In the past, it's been closed during the extended firearms deer season, but open during the special extended firearms deer season. As you guys know, those things have changed. The dates of those special seasons have changed over the last few years quite a bit, and that's created quite a bit of confusion about when turkey season was open and when it was not. So we're recommending that it just be open during the special and regular extended seasons, and again remain closed during the regular firearms deer season.
Any questions from anybody? Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Any more? Any from the audience, the public?
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 5-0.
Thank you.
That concludes our regularly scheduled meeting. Is there any issues? Yeah, Chris?
Mr. Chairman, if we could just briefly talk about the future meetings. We had talked about them, and this is why we set them so far in advance. Next month, on the 25th, we're in Wichita. 27th of June, Garden City. And we had tentatively talked about August 1st at the Wetlands Education Center. And it turns out the Wetlands Education Center was booked that far in advance. So then we looked for an alternative date in August with the commission, which was not available. It seemed like everybody's schedules conflicted. And so the decision was made to move up one of the requests. So we'll go to Yates Center in August.
August the 1st?
August the 1st.
Ducks in the 8th Center.
And then October 17th in Hutch, right? And I don't think we need to set a January date probably until the next meeting or.
Someone, the gal that Randy put me in contact with at the university there is calling me about a date, so
Oh, okay.
it would help me if we said it.
What month was that?
January.
January.
It's-
All right.
Last year was the 10th, so it's a B.
We need to set it. It's usually before the legislature starts. We could go the 9th. That would be the Thursday before the legislature begins.
Was June the 20th or 27th?
June 27th.
27th.
Yes.